The David Pakman Show at davidpakman.com.
Are we recording?
We are recording.
Welcome to the bonus show. I've decided to just relax and do whatever on the bonus show. No, only members see this, right?
Yeah, that's the benefit of the bonus show. I mean, only members.
Only members. So I won't curse. Usually I know that's the
can.
difference. I know I can, but I'm trying not to. I got approached by a company, said that they wouldn't mind bringing my show on if I didn't cuss so much. So I'm really actively trying to stop using so much profanity on air.
I think the last time that you filled in for David, you had a very close call.
Yeah.
And I had to remind you.
Yeah.
We're subject to FCC violations here.
Exactly. And it's a problem I've had all my life, Pat, to be honest with you. I've been cussing like this since I was 5. Like,
really?
You know, and I'm surprised my son doesn't cuss as much as I mean, I don't cuss around him. Curse, depending on who you say. Cuss is from the South, curse up north. I don't curse around my kids, obviously, but
I think I have a way of distinguishing in my mind when I shouldn't swear.
Yeah.
So, like, if I'm around elderly people or family members for an event or on a show that goes on television and radio.
I mean, elderly people, young people.
Young people.
The most hilarious. Okay, we're going to talk about a story here in a second, folks. But we didn't get to do any banter back and forth. The most hilarious is in a previous life, back when I was like, if you watch Doctor Who, a few regenerations ago, I was a totally different person, and I actually was a speaker, a minister. I used to go to churches and preach, and I would always have to remind myself, like, oh God, please don't let me cuss. Don't let me curse. Don't curse. Don't curse. Don't curse. So it was it's kind of hard when you just have I've always had a mouth of a sailor since I was 5 years old, and it hasn't plagued me, but I have to actively work to not curse.
And you also run the risk of using the Lord's name in vain too, which
God.
you absolutely don't want to do while you're preaching. That would be breaking one of the 10 commandments.
Oh man, I'll be chased out. Well, I was already chased out of the church, so that's neither here nor there. I was pretty much chased out because I support gay rights, and that pretty made me. Yeah, it's pretty. You know, church is not that. Anyway, let's talk about some stories. We'll talk about church another time.
Okay.
Here's some pretty interesting stories for the bonus show. So Melania Trump has settled. I think the total was of about 2.9 million that she settled with the Daily Mail. I may have the numbers wrong, but she was engaged in a libel suit against them. They accused her during the campaign of being an escort. She sued. She was going for $150 million in damages. Turns out that she, of course, didn't get that in the settlement, but this has come to an end finally.
Yeah, that's good. I mean, I'm usually against bringing Melania Trump into Donald's criticisms, and that's certainly the case for Barron, his youngest child. The adult children, I think, are fair game because they're surrogates of his campaign. But, you know, every family member has a choice as to the extent of the role that they want to play in Trump's campaign and now administration. And if they don't want to have much of a role, which Melania seems to have chosen, then that's totally fine. The one criticism that I do think was fair game about Melania during the campaign was that she worked here illegal. No, not so much that, because that was her speechwriter. But that she worked here illegally. And that wasn't so much a criticism against her as it was Donald Trump's hypocrisy.
Right. No, that was a major deal. Not only did she work here illegally, but Donald Trump had some models who worked here. His modeling agency allegedly used people illegally here in the United States. The Daily Mail, I think, is an oldest organization. It's been around
1897.
1890. Yeah, so the early 1900s. They've apologized. They've retracted the story. They said, quote, "We accept that these allegations about Mrs. Trump are not true, and we retract and withdraw them." So you have to be careful, right? You know, we do a lot of commentary. We do a lot. I used to write for a lot of these organizations, clickbait sites, if you want to call them that. You still have to be responsible in your reporting. You can't just call someone an escort without some substantial evidence to support your claim.
Right, it was entirely speculation, and it doesn't seem like they labeled that as so. But, you know, libel is also one of those restrictions that we have on the First Amendment, and I understand the Daily Mail is a UK publication, but that point aside, it seems like Donald Trump doesn't really have too much respect for freedom of speech as he claims, because he's sued people for libel himself. He sued Bill Maher over a simple joke.
Yeah, what was the joke about?
Back when the birther controversy was a big deal, when Trump was claiming that Obama wasn't born in the United States, Bill Maher made a joke that Donald Trump was the son of someone and an orangutan. So that was worth being sued for libel over.
I mean, it's a joke, though, right? I'm sure that
Yeah.
didn't go anywhere. Like, but this is Donald Trump's MO. And it seemed as though Melania was jumping on the bandwagon, but I think she had a legitimate claim here, right? I think she had a legitimate qualm with someone calling you basically saying your profession, instead of being a model, you were actually working for an escort agency. That's a bold accusation. But Donald Trump, along with other people, they try to use libel lawsuits in order to squash any discussion about them that they don't approve.
Yeah, it's just kind of too bad that that $3 million is going to Melania Trump, where it would be better used somewhere else, because I don't think she's very tight on money right now.
Yeah, I don't think she's struggling for anything. And if she was, she could just, benefit off the taxpayer dollars that are being funneled into the Trump towers and to every way imaginable.
Yeah.
But this is actually a cautionary tale to journalists, to quote unquote journalists, to commentators, to people. Just be responsible in your reporting. That's all you really have to do. I remember clearly when this story came across our desk at some other outlets, and we had the option of writing this story. My managing editor said, no, hell no, we're not writing that story because we're going to get sued. And he was giving the same advice to people at the Daily Mail. They didn't listen, and they got sued.
Yeah, and that's the risk that you run when you're reporting. We, of course, do an opinion show, so we have some leeway, but we also have the integrity to say that we don't know this is a fact yet. If true, then this.
Right.
And we always make those
disclaimers.
Disclaimers, I guess.
Yeah, absolutely. All right, so the other story we want to talk about, I don't know if you remember Representative Joe Wilson of South Carolina back in 2009. It was a joint session of Congress. It wasn't the State of the Union.
I think maybe because it was Obama's first year in office, they don't call it a State of the Union the first year, because this happened in 2009.
Right. So that makes sense. But you remember when President Obama was discussing a particular issue, I forgot what he was talking about, but Joe Wilson shouted out, "You lie." And we've never seen that level of disrespect for a sitting president.
Yeah, total breach of decorum there.
Yeah.
Sam Alito, I think one of the Supreme Court justices, did a similar thing by mouthing out the words,
Not true. Yeah.
And, that was above and beyond. I guess they can't do nearly as much as the senators and congressmen can do, because Supreme Court is considered apolitical. I'm getting off the train here.
No, that's good.
But, yeah. Joe Wilson should not have done that. He should have silenced himself. No one even knew who he was before he made those claims. So it's a good thing that his voters now are yelling the same thing back at him.
Right. And actually, we did. It's actually not your fault, Pat. I took the long way around to get to the whole point of why we're even talking about Joe Wilson. So what is this, 8 years? 8 years after he did this, he has now suffered the same fate. Karma is not without a sense of irony, it appears. So there's an audience at Aiken Technical College in Graniteville, South Carolina, where Joe Wilson was speaking, and it was a 40-minute presentation with question and answers with regard to Obamacare. And some of his constituents, during the middle of a Facebook live stream, shouted out, "You lie." And of course, this makes national news because no one would ever forget when he did the same thing to President Obama.
Yeah, and it's really not even that clever of them, because it's the obvious critique that they can make, the obvious thing that they can point out. At least Joe Wilson was able to have a town hall, because it seems like a lot of these politicians, Republicans in particular, are not willing to do so at this point. And sometimes they even bring up their own safety as the reason why they can't.
Because God forbid you have a town hall with a bunch of older, middle-aged white Americans who probably aren't going to do anything but disagree with you. If you feel unsafe because people are disagreeing with you, Pat, you don't need to be in politics.
And they always cite the assassination attempt of Gabby Giffords quite a few years ago. But they hold events all the time. You're willing to go out in public. You're just not willing to face an adversarial audience.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, that's cowardice. Right. To use Gabby Giffords in that way, especially when you think of the guy who shot her, he was not only mentally challenged. I don't know the exact phrase, and I don't want to say anything that's ableist, but he did have some mental issues as a part of his calculus. But he also had strong ideological leanings that actually pushed him to this. And coupled with the fact that at that time people were using targets on representatives' districts as a means of saying we'll use Second Amendment remedies, or we've got our this was in the entire lexicon of political discourse at the time. We're nowhere near that, and part of it is because of what happened to Gabby Giffords. So to use Gabby Giffords as a reason to suggest that you're not going to do public appearances is both disingenuous but highly cowardly.
Or some of these lawmakers are saying cowardly. Yeah,
cowardly.
Some of these lawmakers are saying, well, I'm not willing to do it in person, but I'll do it via Skype. But the problem with that is that there's a whole process by which you screen who's going to ask you questions.
Yeah.
And the whole point of a town hall is that you're not really prepped. You just have to face the crowd there and do your best.
They don't want that accountability. They're not interested whatsoever in that accountability. All right, one last thing that we probably I'm going to be honest with the bonus show people members right now. I'm probably going to cover this on the main show tomorrow. What's happening in Turkey? So Turkey is looking to have a referendum on April 16th. They will vote whether or not to abandon their parliamentary system in exchange for an executive presidency, which, according to the Economist.com, is not a problem in and of itself, right? But what the problem is, their new constitution, in light of the attempted coup, Erdogan's grab on power, his suppression of dissent, and the new constitution. It seems as though this referendum is not so much to create a strong presidency like we have in the United States, but to amalgamate more power into the hands of Erdogan, who's already been in power since, I think, 2003.
And I think one of the stipulations of passing this referendum would allow him to stay in power theoretically into the 2020s, 2020s, like a decade from now.
That's absurd. Erdogan is an interesting character. I don't want to use the language. I almost called him a problem, but he's an interesting character. Turkey is a member of NATO. And they have the benefit of this relationship with the United States. I remember back in January 2015 when they shot down the Russian fighter jet. What's interesting about Erdogan is after shooting down this Russian fighter jet, he has shifted completely to being more favorable towards Vladimir Putin than the United States. Although they're a part of NATO and benefit from the protection of the United States, Erdogan is basically spitting in the face of the United States on many issues, and so really giving the impression on the international stage that he would prefer a relationship with Russia.
Well, I think even just the geographical implications of where Turkey is causes them to have some strange alliances, because they're politically trying to join the EU, I think, at this point. They had to get rid of the death penalty so they could join. But they're also just physically located in the Middle East, in Asia, and just there's so many things around there. Politically, it's a confusing country. Yeah,
politically, ideologically, and particularly their president is a very confusing president, in the sense of, you know what? It's not fair to say he's confusing. He's doing what he believes is in his best political interest, right? We can, if we interpret everything that he does directly from what's in his personal interest, every move he makes sense, but it doesn't make sense for geopolitics.
It kind of reminds me of what Vladimir Putin has done over the past decade plus, where he'll go from president to prime minister, back to president. Yeah. It's just an authoritarian power grab.
It is an authoritarian power grab, and Erdogan seems to be equal to the task. And maybe that's why he's so fond of Putin. It makes sense. All right, folks, so that's our bonus show. Join us tomorrow. I don't have, it's great hanging out with you guys.
I think we're the dream team, Ben. I think the audience has to come up with some sort of nickname for us, wouldn't you say? Because this happens every few months.
Yeah, it happens every few months. I'll be back tomorrow, and I'll be back again is it next week?
Yeah, 2 weeks from now.
It's 2 weeks from now. So you're going to see a lot of me over the next couple of days, and hopefully we can have a good time doing it. I'm sure we will. Pat, it's been a pleasure.
The David Pakman Show at davidpakman.com.